next topic is pretty close to my heart. I'm a journalist, and with the advent of 24-hour news cycles and ever-increasing global connectivity, the question is, how are media channels and traditional journalism being challenged and transformed through the web? To chair this discussion, please welcome to the stage Senior Strategy Director at Free Press, Timothy Carr.
I'd like to invite the panelists up as well. Why don't we please have a seat? How's everyone doing? Sunday afternoon. So I'm honored to be the chair for this discussion. The theme, or the title of our session is Digital Journalism, News and Tech, which is a topic that is impossibly broad. Presumably, most every journalist uses a computer and the internet to do his or her job. So I'm going to take the prerogative to narrow this definition a little bit so that we can have a more focused discussion. And I'd like the focus to be a discussion of a term that's called open journalism. Open journalism is the idea that we live in a world where the people formerly known as the news audience, to paraphrase a term from NYU journalism professor Jay Rosen, the people formerly known as the news audience are no longer passive players, but participants in news reporting, dissemination, and feedback. The digital tools and platforms that they use include smartphones and Twitter, and they have enabled a new type of journalism that has become so disruptive to traditional journalism that, to quote a former journalist or friend who said, we can no longer get away with the bullshit. And that's because we've created a feedback loop that has allowed people not only to become involved in the story at the beginning, but give feedback to the journalists to tell them where they're wrong. And so there's a common practice among some journalists of actually, before they write a story, to go on social media, to go on Twitter, to go on Facebook and say, I'm thinking about writing about this issue. Do any of you have any ideas? Or, I'm coming to your community. Would anyone like to talk to me about what sort of issues you care about? And actually starting from a very open format, going into a community and kind of letting that community write the story. And that is a concept of open journalism that is being practiced to some extent in some circles. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. We'd only have 45 minutes. We hope to get some questions from you. Our panelists will attempt to talk about their part of the work and get through that so that we can actually hear from some of you. I'm gonna sit down and then start the discussion. So to my left is Max Harlow. He is a software developer at The Guardian. And over the past 3 years, he has been involved in building The Guardian's content API, an open platform which powers their mobile apps and responsive site. He has also created live blogging and collaboration tools for the journalists that work there. To Max's left is Rosalind Warren, who is a news reporter for BuzzFeed UK, where she covers internet culture, world news, and women's rights. Before that, before BuzzFeed, she worked at the media site Upworthy as a social news writer, and we'll hear a little bit more about what that means later. And then Michaela is the founder of the Henley Herald. She founded it in January 2013. And for the community of Henley-on-Thames, the Henley Herald is an online news site that allows people from the community to post their own stories and photos. And as the strapline at the Henley Herald Center says, it's about reporting local news by local people as it happens. Max, why don't we start with you and give us some idea of the work you do and how open journalism plays a part in that.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I'm a software developer. I'm a programmer, I write code. I've been at The Guardian for coming up for 3 years now. And I think there's probably 3 major sort of initiatives that I've worked on which can probably be included under the umbrella of open. The first was building tools for journalists to write live blogs. I think they're perhaps kind of underlooked, but live blogs are a medium of telling news which is totally native to the web. There's no way you can do a live blog on any other medium. And it's a change that's enabled by technology, right? And we built the tools to allow journalists to tell stories in that way and improve the quality of our reporting. The others was my current projects. I work on something called the Content API. For those of you not familiar with the concept of an API, it's a programmatic way of accessing some data. In the case of the Guardian's Content API, it's the Guardian's content. Right? It's all our stories, it's all our journalism. And the Guardian has a lot of different apps and services. We have our new responsive site, we have an Android app, an iOS app, a Google Glass app for that matter. And all those need to be able to get the stories to be able to present them to users. And they get them from the Content API. But it's also an open API, so if anyone here wants to build an application using the Guardian's content, you can, right? You can just build it on top of the same infrastructure that the Guardian uses. And my final thing was building tools to allow journalists to investigate stories. So as governments, both here and around the world, as well as many corporations, publish far more public data about how they operate now than they've ever done before. We can use technology to look at that data to improve the quality and speed of our reporting. It's inclusive data analysis, but also building tools to alert journalists when a story might be happening based on public data.
And how would an interested Guardian reader engage with some of the applications and tools that you're using, other than what people traditionally, if you can say anything is traditional in the internet world, traditionally think about, interaction is it happens after the reporting, when people add a comment to the story. Is there a way, are there ways in any of the tools that you're building that would allow them to actually get involved in a story before it's written?
Sure. So about a year ago, we developed something called Guardian Witness, which is use the acronym UGC, User Generated Content Platform, which makes it sound really dull and tedious. But actually, it's been quite a success. And this is a way that readers can send in pictures and videos from where they are. So they might do a call out for something fun, something BuzzFeedy, like, send us pictures of your cats doing crazy stuff, and people do. But also they use it for hard news. So they've done call-outs for people in Syrian refugee camps, and people have sent in videos and pictures about what it's really like to be there, and then we can then report on those.
Great.
Hi, I'm a reporter at BuzzFeed, which is a digital-only site, which means that we've been socially native from the start. And by that, myself and other reporters will report on not only news specifically related to what's happening on social media, whether that's stories, conversations happening on Twitter, or Facebook groups that have a controversial theme, or YouTube stars that have been caught up in a scandal or something along those lines. Generally speaking, a lot of what we do focuses on news that wouldn't necessarily be traditionally reported on in newspapers. So that's a large chunk of what I report on day to day, as well as how we report the news is very much reflective of that. So we, as reporters, will pull tweets in and look for stories on Twitter, and we're starting to, a big focus of ours is to use Vines to tell stories, or to crowdsource from our audience various subject areas and work with our audience to build a story, highlighting their experiences and their voices. So a lot of what I do is mostly talking about and communicating with this sort of social, digitally engaged audience that we have, which is primarily a young audience as well as the way that we report things, whether it's through our live blog sort of system now, or whether it's through Vines, or we're starting to now even develop how we tell the news on platforms like WhatsApp. So it's definitely, that's where the majority of our traffic comes from, is social. And so that is clearly a very key part of how I report news for BuzzFeed. So, yeah.
I noticed from your bio that your previous job was with Upworthy,
Yes.
And you described yourself as a social news writer,
What a weird,
which is
yeah.
a term that I'm guessing, I think I know what that means. I've never really heard it before, but I'm familiar with Upworthy and their methods. How does that describe? How would you describe that?
Yeah, that's a bit of an odd job title, I suppose. What I essentially did at Upworthy would be, it was more of a curator type role, where we would work with mostly non-profits, or we would go and find videos or photo series about social issues. So that actually set us apart. I know a lot of people have the idea that Upworthy's just, on headlines on Facebook, but actually it's a mission-driven company. And so as a social news writer, whatever curator type role I have would be to essentially find these things that are slowly either bubbling up or undiscovered gems on the internet, whether that's a video about domestic violence that's, is really powerful, or whether that's a LGBT rights video from someone giving a speech somewhere that is, being talked about online. We would sort of pull these together, and it was a heavy focus on A/B testing. And so while a lot of other sites would perhaps just sort of throw a video up with a kooky headline, we would do at least per post, I would do at least sort of 15 tests. And so A/B testing being, we would test not only a series of very contrasting headlines, but thumbnails was a big key thing, because the majority of the traffic Upworthy grew from was from Facebook. And so it was a very heavy focus on understanding our audience on Facebook and what would share well and what wouldn't. And so as a social news writer, it would be to sort of understand what was being talked about online, what would key in, what would our audience find interesting, and a bit of a weird title, I suppose. But yeah, that's generally what I did at Upworthy. Yeah.
But Upworthy is more than just providing interesting news for the readers and testing it to make sure that they'll read it, but there is also a sense of social mission. So it's not only education, but also engagement in some respects.
Absolutely, yeah. My background before that was mostly non-profit, and so it was, certainly. It wouldn't necessarily drive our audience or encourage them to go and sign a petition or something, but it was more to present these issues in I would argue, a more accessible way for someone that would maybe not necessarily know about certain issues. So whether that's about a global crisis happening, or something that a mom in middle America wouldn't necessarily, if she wouldn't pick up a newspaper as such, but if she sees her friend sharing a story on Facebook, she's more inclined to go and click and see what they're talking about. And that was the sort of idea behind Upworthy, was to try and reach people on that platform in a sort of conversational tone with a lot of our writing. So absolutely, yes, it was definitely social mission driven, absolutely.
Right. Next, Michaela, do you want to speak a little bit about your work?
Okay. Probably just have the first, just to show you.
You can actually see down on the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is the Henley Herald, which I launched in January 2013. As Tim said, it's a community news website just for the people of Henley-on-Thames. My vision was to promote the town, support the community groups and the local charities, and give a positive reflection of our fantastic town that we all live in. Unlike, unfortunately, our local newspaper, which unfortunately over the last 2 years has got, it's missing some of those great newsworthy stories to them that aren't important. Some of the smaller charities, some of the smaller community groups like the Lions, the Round Table, basically they either weren't covering them or they were weeks old and sometimes months old before they'd even print the story. It just is not important to them any longer. And Henley is not just about the regatta. It's an all year round place to live. Obviously the World comes in July every year, but there are some fantastic other things going on all year round. And also most of the stories at the local paper is now quite negative. If you were looking to buy a property in Henley, you think, actually, would I really want to come and live here? If they can find something to say negative, they will. So that's why I wanted to develop the Herald. I obviously had to do it very quietly. They knew nothing about it until it was launched. It can be easily updated by all members of the community to post their own news stories, their own events, reviews, photos. As soon as it happens, in their own words and without any interference from me, really. All I am is a moderator to check there's nothing, libelous in it. And really, it's just like thousands of people posting stories on Facebook groups. It's an extension of that. The next slide is just an example of a review of the Henley Festival, which is a fantastic music festival that happens after the regatta in July. And it was literally posted the next day. The next slide I'd like to say is just it should be the cricket. Yeah, sorry, I can see it down here. Henley Cricket Club are one of our contributors. So basically, on a Monday morning after they've played their match, they can post their own match report. And if someone could click on the top where the community groups are, on the top menu, there's a whole list of other community groups that have access already. We're still trying to get people online and post their own stories. There's a whole load more groups than that in Henley. Newspapers have constraints of space. Obviously, the web doesn't. Many of our stories, as you've already seen, have picture sliders on them. I always say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and people just love selfies these days. They love to see their pictures. So the next example is of, it's a music festival, but it's for the youth of Henley. The youth bands put on this fantastic day of music. There was food, other entertainment, face painting, hair braiding, etc. You can see all those lovely pictures coming through. And that was fed through the Facebook group and got, a few hundred hits, which is great. The younger generation really get the Henley Herald. With over 50% of people now having smartphones, and they want to be able to access the web 24/7, wherever they are. Someone told me the other day that they used to live in Henley, but they now live in Hong Kong, and they come to the Herald to see what's going on in Henley. And they want to view it on their smartphones. Our readers, there's over 50% of our readers view the Herald online on their smartphone. It resizes down. It's been developed that way. Often I'm asked whether I'm a journalist. No, I'm not. My background is marketing, and the marketing tools and platforms that are now available have made the Herald possible. Social media is an important part of spreading and driving visitors to the website, and every story automatically tweets and shares on Facebook. It's a plug-in on the back end of the site. We've also got a thing at the top, breaking news we use for travel. When the river was flooding in January and February, people were coming and just seeing that ticker flying through, telling us whether a certain road was closed. We kept it up to date. And as I think you've all said, every story now you can make a comment. Well, you can make a comment on every story of the Herald as well. The next example is people are commenting on Henley's a great place to live, but to get in and out of is quite difficult. So the one we're showing, I think, next is have your say on the transport in Henley, which is a big niggle. And lastly, I just wanted to say, sorry, I've rambled on a little bit here. I see my role as not just an editor or a journalist, but a community networker, providing a platform for the people of Henley to share their news. The Herald is already a pioneer, I believe, in the transition of giving people the power of voice for the people of Henley.
Thank you. I mean, you've shown some examples of user-generated news covering musical festivals, events like that. Is there an opportunity, should one of the members of the community want to do investigative journalism style reporting, hard news? Is that?
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah?
I've thrown the Herald out to everyone in the community to say, you know, if you want to tell me about something and we can publish it, we will publish it. And I've got people now saying that they want to write a certain blog. I have potentially an Olympic rower who said on Friday he's going to write a blog for us, which is absolutely fantastic news.
That's great. So this term, people formerly known as the audience, which is often referred to describe newsreaders, is interesting, and because it's not only changed the definition of the audience, but I think it's changed the definition of journalism to the extent that efforts to define journalism tend to fail. Certainly in the United States, efforts to define journalism in law are incredibly controversial, but we've sort of settled on this idea that it's not who you are, it's what you do. It's the act of journalism that matters. And in many news story today, even in traditional media, uses material that was captured by someone who just happened to be on the scene with a smartphone that had a video camera. And I'm wondering, in your experience, certainly, I think, Max, you might be best answer this because you work at a journalism organization, whether there is some tension about the using materials that are generated by people who aren't professionally trained, but nonetheless may be providing information that is very newsworthy.
I wouldn't say so at all, though it's something that journalists have to get used to. In terms of breaking news, like if you're interested in a breaking news event, like the best place to go, as I think we probably all know, is probably Twitter, right? And it won't always necessarily be accurate and reliable, right? But it will be first. And I think the role of journalists in that kind of situation is to, in a breaking news situation, is to be able to fact check what comes in, so ensure that we only publish things that we know are true, or if we know that we're not sure about them, to be able to signpost and say, this is we're seeing reports of this, but we can't confirm them yet. And you'll see a lot of that if you follow any of our live blogs. So we have a lot of regular ones there's one called Middle East Live, which will follow a lot of Twitter accounts from people in the region, YouTube accounts, and then syndicate what's known and what's true, and sort of filter down to a brief analysis that people can consume in a way that they can trust everything that's written, right?
Right.
Which they might not be able to do in Twitter.
By the way, I love the fact that we're having this conversation with the typewriter going in the background. Thinking it reminds me of some old movies. Rosalind, with the work that BuzzFeed does, it seems like oftentimes the editorial decisions about what makes a top headline are driven by I don't know, to use a word, clickability of it. It's driven by its ability to get a lot of readers. How do the editors there make those kind of decisions, balancing that kind of? I mean, that's a part of the business model of BuzzFeed, as I understand it. Yeah. That it's an organization that hires credible journalists with long backgrounds. So how do they balance those two tensions?
Well, I mean, BuzzFeed also practices A/B testing, but if in a sense you mean that there's, in terms of the divide of serious, hard-hitting reporting from the Middle East alongside sort of fun, viral things. Yes. I think everyone who works at BuzzFeed, first going into the job, is fully appreciates and understands that our audience is an audience that will want to read both and is not sort of excluding one or the other. And in terms of BuzzFeed is now developing its news team and sort of putting serious focus on that, actually. Both with separating the news area on the site as well as still having, you can go now just to BuzzFeed specific area on the site and not have to see all the sort of fun, crazy headlines or whatever it is that we have. But just to bounce off actually what he was saying about verification with our reporting as well, It's certainly something as we are, socially native in the sense of like a lot of our reporting will go to Twitter first, and we'll have a look. And so, for example, every year when there's a big storm, the same storm photo is going around viral on Twitter, and it's like, look at this crazy photo of the storm that's happening here, and everyone then, a lot of serious news organizations as well, like CNN and huge organizations where you think that you would, with a very respectable background in reporting, but